Hello, my name is Sofia and I work for the Post-Growth Innovation Lab, and in this episode we're thinking about how placemaking relates to the economy, so tune in.
Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica Podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner ISEE. ISEE is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it.
Today we have a new story from Pontevedra, and I have the pleasure to welcome a new storyteller, Sofia, to Urbanistica Podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
Good. Well, day 4. I'm a bit jaded, to be honest.
How was your placemaking week?
My placemaking week was active, full and liquid.
I'm happy that you still have some energy to do the podcast.
I would put my brain at a high capacity. Well, the highest.
Yeah, let's maximize now. So, what is let's say 2 favorite moments from the week?
This is an easy one. I joined a workshop with kids where we reimagined an urban square, and that was incredible. Just seeing how you can engage young people like that. And the kind of things they were coming up with were just really funny.
Sofia, is it with kids or for kids? You had actual kids?
Yeah, there were kids from one of the schools in Pontevedra.
Yeah.
And we were observing them critiquing the planning of a square and coming up with drawings for what they would want there.
Okay, can you share with us some of what they say?
Yeah, they really, really didn't like the benches, and they wanted a basketball hoop and a fountain, and they came up with really elaborate designs for the fountain to clasp hands. Very clear design ideas, I'd say.
Okay, so easy to implement, maybe. Mm-hmm. Kind of.
Well, apart from the zoo and the aqua park, which was.
And what is your second favorite moment? We don't count the podcasts within this.
Oh, okay. Sorry that wasn't also an immediate easy answer. It's not a moment, but I'd say it's a feeling of being in a community, because I do interdisciplinary research, and it often means that you feel like you're not really in the right place a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And being here within this festival, I really felt like finally I'm with people who think in the same kind of way.
Yeah, nice. So let's talk more about you. You are our storyteller in this episode. How would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us about your passion?
So I'm a researcher. I'm currently working for a project based here in Pontevedra called Prospera, and it's thinking about how we can build futures that are no longer obsessed with economic growth. And I'm coming to this with a very mixed horizontal background. We were speaking earlier about having, your feet in many pies. That's not a phrase. Your finger in many pies. So I have a degree in classics, and then a master's in art history, and a PhD in looking at the history of urban planning.
Wow.
And I'm trying to combine all of those very broad things into a project that looks at how we can challenge the logics of urban planning, the mainstream logics, through artistic methods.
Yeah. What are you passionate about?
Placemaking.
Really?
I'm passionate about teaching. I really love it when you see that when you're teaching somebody or trying to engage them in something, and you can see in their eyes that something clicks, and that.
Yeah, they finally got it.
Yeah, that's what really I find so rewarding.
So placemaking, you're passionate about like teaching and placemaking.
Yeah, I think that's why I enjoyed the kids' workshop so much. Just the unexpected outcomes of that, but also seeing how people are so willing to respond to activities that you ask them, and when they're really, in it, that's what I love doing.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about like your research project that you're doing here in Pontevedra. Can you share with us?
Okay, so as a group, we are looking at all different kinds of things and thinking about how they might be organised if the objective wasn't to grow the economy, and it was based around different values. So we have people looking at things like food production, I'm urban planning, mobilities, circular economy. It's a critique of what's going on right now, but also tries to imagine what might be.
Okay.
And I've been here a year now, and I'm finding my feet with where I'm going. And I'm hoping to study the ways that art can facilitate different political outcomes.
Mm-hmm. So it's about like growing or growth, but not economically. Did I understand things?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It's seeking to redefine what we mean by innovation, which is typically, things becoming faster, more efficient, etc., for the objective of growth, but often that leads to outcomes that aren't conducive to human flourishing, or planetary flourishing, etc. And thinking, okay, well, if growth wasn't how things had to work, like for example with urban planning, often it's like you have to have the prospect of growth for things to happen, then what kind of culture might we have, and what technologies might we develop, etc.
By the way, like I'm zero in economy and talking about like economical growth. So I don't, maybe when in our talk, I will not like argue with numbers and so on, but maybe some principles.
Okay.
And maybe I'm gonna ask you, can you explain this to me? Because like zero, so I hope you're just like fine with that.
Well, as you would have heard from my brief CV, I am also not an economist. I'm also looking at this in terms of what I would judge as common sense, rather than, I'm not big on numbers. And we do have people working in degrowth and material throughput and like big on numbers.
So like if I put it very simple, so the way we measure growth now is by economy, how much money we make. True?
Yeah, GDP, right?
Yeah.
And it's quite well critiqued now that this is not a good measure of many things. Indeed, the guy who came up with it even said, like, look, this is quite dangerous because obviously it measures wealth creation, but it doesn't measure what you're taking away.
Yeah, like the resources from the planet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's not just a question of coming up with better metrics. It's more like, how can we orientate what we do around values? And there are several positions on that. How might we actually do that?
Yeah. So like we need to value something else than money.
Profit, yeah.
Profit.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we need a new currency.
Yeah. There's one of the things that's come out this week is lots of discussion of different forms of capital, like social capital. Yeah. Exactly.
Can we say like environmental capital or no?
Well, it has been used, I noticed yesterday.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with just the use of the word capital at all.
Yeah. What should we use instead? Like resources? Or?
I suppose, it is a measure of value, but when you use this terminology, like the language of placemaking, if you're going to use terms like social capital, environmental capital, for me, you're still in a mindset where you're thinking about profit.
Yeah. I agree with you. I just had an episode and we talked about the language that we use here. It's also dangerous, like because it's mirror what we think. So if we stay like use the word that same people use that like for economic growth, then we didn't do anything. Like there's no change. Like we're still on the same bubble, no?
Yeah, it's, I guess, the trade-off between how do you communicate a concept to people using language that they understand, and how do you differentiate what you're doing from what's there and what you're pushing against, really.
Yeah.
And so, can you translate maybe these concepts?
Yeah. So are you like advocating for the degrowth concept or concept or strategy?
Personally. Well, I suppose it's quite difficult to define it, whether it's a strategy or a movement, but I suppose I can...
Nice to have kids around.
like the main principle of degrowth is to limit material consumption and material throughput.
Yeah. Maybe not limit, like
Cut down.
Yeah.
But to
like,
put some limits on it, right?
exactly. Yeah.
Whereas post-growth thinks, and degrowth requires a different economic system, full stop. I would say, because I'm concentrating on urban planning, I would define my thinking slightly more as post-growth, because I think that we can change the urban planning system within the existing economic system.
Okay.
There's really a lot of literature about the differences between the origins of these approaches, and I'm not going to kind of try and diminish all of that nuance by explaining it.
Yeah, because like here in Sweden, we also start to talk about like stop building new buildings. Let's use what we have, or reuse what we have instead of building new buildings. Like this is how we should define growth in urban planning, like taking care of what we have now instead of building new areas and so on. Is this what like you thinking about?
Definitely, that's a big debate between innovation and maintenance, I suppose, where you're thinking, okay, it's not just about cycles of creative destruction where you destroy a building to create a new and better one. You also have to think about reuse, repair, and creating relationships between people and those buildings where they are maintained over time. I mean, obviously the environmental impact of destroying a building and rebuilding is huge.
Yeah.
But also, as we know from like Jane Jacobs' work, etc., if you destroy a building, you're destroying more than that. It's about community and connections and memories.
Exactly. But also like the reason why we expand is like, like population growing up. And so maybe like the capacity of the city, we don't have capacity. What should we do when we have growing population? We have to expand the city. How should we think there?
Okay. So I would like to approach this problem from a post-growth perspective, which is that the way that planning works now in general, it's actually creating itself a set of problems that it can't solve, because planning is generating economic growth, which helps to generate population growth and environmental impact. So you need more planning to mitigate that. So it's kind of its own, it's shooting itself in the foot. So perhaps if we changed the objectives of planning, or like what planning does as one of its outcomes, so that it's not just economic growth, then we would be able to deal with these problems a bit better.
So what is like the biggest mistake that we are doing when we plan cities is that we still think about the economical growth, like how much square meters, how much the city will get in, the land or the real estate developer will get in, like it's all about money.
I mean, I'm not going to speak about the whole planning system, but I think often what will happen is that a project might be privileged over another because it can receive investment. It has a prospect of profit. And I think that often spaces, particularly public spaces, are converted into monetized spaces because of that too. So protecting public space, obviously, like preaching to the converted here, and finding ways to plan which don't require, in low growth situations, which don't require profit.
Yeah, and like to change the mindset here and the system and the structure. Who is responsible in starting this?
Oh, well,
I know like everybody should be part of this movement because we all live on this planet and so on.
So a post-growth perspective on that would be that the planner has values and that they have a power to change outcomes.
The city.
Sorry?
The city, like or the urban planners.
Urban planner.
Okay.
So Christian Lamke has done some great work on trying to think about how can you conceptualize a post-growth planner, like one that's not obsessed with growth and is trying to infuse space with different values. So I would say that it is the planner's responsibility to do that, and that's a top-down perspective. But then obviously we accompany that with other bottom-up practices. And
I'm an urban planner, and we have many planners listening to the podcast from more than 132 countries. So can you give us like some inspiration of what kind of values we can think about in order just not to prioritize the economical one?
Oof.
No pressure.
I am not an urban planner. Okay.
Like from your point of view.
Yeah, I suppose rather than profit, you think more about dwelling or exploration, like a slightly more abstract things. The quality of a space, all these things that are so key to placemaking, like connection, utility, imagination, possibility. Big buzzwords would be experimentation and unknown outcomes, right? Many of the papers that I've read on planning beyond growth think about how you can reconceptualize what planning even means, because planning is meant to facilitate a known outcome, right? But if you're planning beyond growth, you have to accept that you might not know what's going to happen. So making space for that messiness and open-endedness in what the kind of spaces that you're creating.
Yeah. No, you're telling like experimenting is like a buzzword, or what do you say? Like experimenting.
Well, I think it's easy to put these labels on things, like look at this extremely experimental square, or
because you think it's like wasting of resources if we experiment and we don't know what's there.
No, I think often words like experimentation are used to make things sound experimental.
But I think it is experimental.
Yeah.
What are you disagreeing with?
I'm not disagreeing. Okay, so to use an example, like if you label a technology as experimental, it might lead you to think that that is experimental when it's actually conserving an existing culture.
Got your point now.
In planning, it's different, I suppose. Experimentation is you have the space to make mistakes and without impacting negatively. So when we say experimenting about a project, it's not like true, because we are building a project and we are not experimenting, we are doing stuff, right? Is this how you? I suppose it's when you try out new things and you don't know how it's going to go, and then you adapt along the way. So experimentation and adaptation. How are you ever going to find out anything new unless you experiment? And I suppose this is one of the key words that keeps coming up in my research about post-growth planning, is experimentation and allowing for that.
What do you think about placemaking?
What do I think of placemaking?
Yeah.
I think it's fantastic. It's something that really inspires me, all of the values that are behind it, and some of the things I've seen, the ways to engage people that aren't typically engaged in planning processes, tactical urbanism, in being able to make a space exciting for different people, and those are the things I really admire about it. I think, obviously, I'm aware of the caveats of placemaking. People would list gentrification, etc. Because placemaking, but for whom, is the question. I would consider myself a placemaker. But there are two things that have come up for me that I think are missing from the debates that we've had here.
Yeah, which is?
So, obviously, I work in a research project where we're thinking a lot about the economy. And this is both absent and kind of present in the debates that we've had here, because I think we're missing a connection with the broader picture in debates questioning the relationship between the production of space and economic growth. For example, like I've been speaking about degrowth and post-growth. These are movements which share many of the aims of placemaking, but they're situating urban planning in the picture of the economy, which here I think it's not necessarily being related to that. So my question would be like, how does placemaking relate to these really important debates in post-growth and degrowth, which consider how we can use top-down and bottom-up approaches to create better spaces and a better culture of planning, but in relation to planetary boundaries?
Yeah. So like your point here is that, okay, we do placemaking, community engagement, which is like a great values as well, like the social value. But at the same time, we are not really paying attention about the economical, because also part of the space making, part of the placemaking is to create like a sustainable economy. But we don't talk about what kind of economy, right?
Exactly. Like, I don't think that there's... Yes.
And I think so far we talk a sustainable economy, then it's like growth.
Yeah, exactly. And what does sustainable mean? Like, there's not so much an interrogation of what these terms actually mean. For example, value or sustainability, circularity, yeah, okay. But within what...
What do we mean?
Yeah, what do we mean when we use these words, and within what kind of bigger picture? I think one of the interesting things for placemaking to consider is how it relates to alternative economies. You know, if you're creating an urban garden, for example, you're actually creating an economy between people, which might challenge the otherwise neoliberal logics of the market economy. Yeah,
challenge the state. So, like, okay, this is a great point you're making now. So, as a placemakers, because like placemaking depends a lot about like what kind of economy you generate. So, how should we think there? Like when we start to think about ground level and economy and all this. So, what should we think about?
Well,
like how should we question the economy?
The economy does not exist, is what I would say.
Yeah,
but I'm in the sense that when you're making a place, you have to think at different scales of economy. So the local economy,
which means the area.
Yeah, or between people and networks. Like we saw a great example yesterday of a French street party with food. I mean, that's an economy. You're having people make food together, and it's a circulation of non-monetary value.
Yeah.
And then when you're obviously there's the big picture of if you're generating economic wealth, where does that go? It doesn't necessarily stay local. We had an example from a Dutch planning project yesterday where she was saying, yeah, okay, we're generating all this wealth, but that goes back to the municipality, not into placemaking. So distribution of wealth.
Yeah.
Just asking how those invisible flows work, I guess.
What are the invisible flows?
That's something I just made up. No, but do you know what I mean? Like if the money that you're generating, how the wealth, or to use the term that they used yesterday, the social capital, the environmental capital that you're generating by placemaking, how does that work spatially, like, and in relation to the actual economic capital? Is it staying in the place? Is it going elsewhere? And I know this is a debate that's already live for placemaking.
So like this is on the local level. Is there something else we should think about? The national level? Or no, they are, of course they are like linked together, like you talk about the...
Well, if you zoom all the way out, I suppose...
Like planet-wise?
You will be asking, does capitalism work? You
should feel free to say whatever you want.
Well, the problem is that I don't have an answer for this.
Yeah.
The question is, can placemaking work in the capitalist system, which is so much about generating profit? If placemaking was to become, this massive thing, how does that affect the economy?
Okay, so now, like, because like in many of papers we show that placemaking is actually generating a profit. And now when we are talking, so it's you're kind of questioning placemaking economical value, right? Like if placemaking is a capitalism movement, because in the end, like the real estate developers or city, they will ask for like money to believe in this placemaking somehow. So it's like a kind of placemaking community need to rethink this aspect.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, obviously. I think so. Two things. The first thing is that when in the papers that I've heard, at least, we're talking about value and what placemaking adds. It's not really questioned that whether economic growth is good or not. and how that generates a whole set of environmental, spatial, and social problems.
But maybe we never talk about this.
Yeah.
Because we don't know, like we're not aware of.
Oh, well, in that case, I'm hoping that at the next Placemaking Week, we'll have more space for degrowth and post-growth voices.
Yeah.
For example, I was surprised that there were no donut economics talks. I don't know if you're familiar with donut economics.
The donut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is also, many cities a grassroots initiative that relates very well to placemaking. So perhaps we should be asking whether we can bridge top-down and bottom-up planning by connecting to those initiatives.
Yeah. What do you what do you think about how can we raise awareness
Of the economic implications of placemaking?
Exactly.
Well, by having a podcast, by
Inviting Sofia.
inviting me onto your podcast. How can we raise awareness? I think at the next placemaking, it would be really interesting to have a theme where you were explicitly thinking about how placemaking relates to economic growth, to really tackle that, because it's one of the main criticisms.
Yeah.
I would say that, we're talking about systemic change in so many ways in so many of the talks that we've heard here, but none of those have talked about economic change. So as I said, maybe to involve those communities of degrowth and post-growth scholars
within the discussion.
In placemaking discussions.
Yeah. And I think you can be a main part of it.
Well, that would be fantastic.
And as you know, I don't know if you know or not, before each placemaking week, we collect ideas for the program, and for sure I see you there. So
that would be great.
Yeah. And because now I think it's very, very important that maybe we do things that we are not aware of, or we don't know what's there. So it's important that you raise the question. So what do you if you comment the placemaking week here happening in Pontevedra from this point of view, good or bad? Evaluate. Let's evaluate.
Evaluate placemaking through the perspective of a post-growth.
Exactly.
Well, I would say that I've seen many things that are aligned with post-growth values. For example, in the digital technologies talk, there were some great things there that I think would almost benefit from framing. If someone were to analyse what they're doing, it should be framed through post-growth thinking. That's been really positive, and it's really inspiring to see how many of these grassroots initiatives would actually be changing the logics of space so that it's not about, consuming, and it's more about dwelling. So I see positive things there. Yeah. Frustrating things would be this thing of where is the economy in all of this? In the keynote the other day, we had two economists on the panel.
You mean in the content of the program?
In the content
or what economy?
No, as in with the speakers, they are talking about the economy. I've seen papers, using words like innovation, economic growth, economic value, blah, blah, blah. And it's like it's naturalized, all of this stuff, which is obviously what we're pushing against. So bad from the perspective of not confronting this economic argument.
Yeah. And from so this is more like content-wise that we are not talking at all about this aspect when we talk about economy.
Critically,
yeah. And from the you mentioned before, the local economy and so on, how do you see that?
The local economy?
Yeah, what did placemaking generate? Is it something positive or profit now? For Pontevedra, having this week here.
Well, I would say good things, obviously, bringing international people to Pontevedra to either raise awareness of what's going on here in a good way for urban planning, and bringing footfall to the restaurants here, which I suppose I see what you're saying, but it depends on the economic structure of Pontevedra, with which I'm not very familiar, but I'm assuming that this wealth is staying local.
So because you talk about the hidden flows or where the money goes.
it's my impression that it would generate local wealth. And then you have the soft impact that you kind of have to measure over time, right? That it's raised awareness of this place. It's given people here perhaps a sense of greater, maybe more inspiration in the place that Pontevedra occupies in Europe. I would say, and I know this is something that perhaps we struggled with, it's not like there's been that much community engagement with placemaking locally. Even though there's been a massive initiative to have the translations, which I think is great.
Yeah. So can you update me or the listeners, like how was the different countries dealing with like post-growth, degrowth? Like is this something like countries start to adopt, to think about, to implement, or no? It's like it's a movement there, and nobody wants to join because like it's against the economical profit.
So I'm not 100% clear on which countries would say that they were actually doing degrowth or post-growth planning. I can tell you that these debates aren't new. They're coming out of like a rich literature and movements from the 70s. But actually, post-growth planning and degrowth planning in say is quite a recent development conceptually.
Okay.
Talking 5 to 10 years of papers. And there have been 2 massive recent publications thinking about what it means to do those things. And I'm assuming that now it is to researchers to point out existing cases of post-growth and degrowth planning.
Yeah.
And then to kind of think, okay, how can we replicate that or scale it?
This is like require a massive change in like
systemic.
Yes, like
yeah. How do we
like,
de-neoliberalize planning is the question. Which placemaking does in many ways.
Yeah. So, where does placemaking stand? With a capitalism or with a post growth, right?
I would phrase that differently.
Okay, tell me.
I wouldn't ask placemaking to have a stance on capitalism. I would say that it needs, that when we're thinking about placemaking and as an activity, it needs to be considered in relation to its economic impacts and how it affects, the local economy and the wider economy, which I know is a question that they already consider, but the way that placemaking is approaching these things, it doesn't question the objective of economic growth. Yeah,
because like we already work a lot with like the place-led development, how do we work economy, stronger economy, local economy and so on, but you mean like we take it to the next level, we question what kind of economy are we dealing with?
Yeah, what kinds of economies are being created? And maybe the question is, does placemaking have a stance on capitalism? Because, there are many ways that you might promote alternative economies, if that's the case, with different structures.
Yeah, I made it now like super bold, like capitalism or... No, but like, it depends like from project to project and from like the different actors within the area. And of course, like as a placemaker, try to make them the best for the planet and for the people and for the environment, but still like we are part of a system.
Yeah, I think if you were going to take that question further to kind of pursue it, then the question is, can we bring degrowth and post-growth debates together with placemaking, and how would that interaction produce something good? Well, amongst many other models, the donut economics would be a good way to bring those 2 things together.
Yeah.
Because it shares so many of the things that placemaking has, like needs, equity, housing, etc., but then puts that in planetary boundaries. Yeah.
If you look like 1 year from now, what can be the perfect way to raise this question to our community within during the placemaking? Like, how do we do that? Just an idea.
Oh, well, if you're using the existing framework of the Placemaking Festival, then you should definitely have a panel of people working in post-growth and degrowth, as we said. Perhaps also, just presentations on what we do and how we can connect urban gardening, that's a degrowth thing.
Yeah.
I see it in placemaking.
Yeah.
So let's put those people together and see.
Yeah, we have also like a focus group or working groups working with different like aspect of placemaking, like climate, place development, children, and so on. Could be also interesting to have a conversation with, so they also can upgrade or rethink and see like, okay, what values do we value?
I mean, these communities are working very close together. And
We are super, which is great. Interesting, Sofia.
I have one other thing I would like to say.
Oh my God. No, just kidding. Of course, say it. Tell me.
Am I allowed 2 more minutes? I think another thing I noticed at the festival is that there's increasing digitization of placemaking, which came up in our session. They said like the last time we had this festival, I think we had 2 or 3 papers on this, and now we have like a whole session, 2 sessions with multiple speakers.
Yeah.
And what I would say is that in those papers and approaches, there wasn't so much a questioning of the political questions around technology. So like we're very good about thinking, well, when we create a space or build an infrastructure, what does that do? Like what social hierarchies does it create? Does it connect and divide, etc.? Like a road is a classic example. But we're less good at thinking that technology has politics. And so the question in this case would be, what are the questions surrounding the increasing digitization of placemaking? Can we interrogate that a bit more?
Exactly. And it's so good that you're asking questions. Really.
Okay.
Maybe because you like study PhD or no? No, but it's really good. Like usually people come with some ideas, even if they don't have idea, they try to create. Like I'm talking from podcast point of view. Like so when I ask, okay, so what do you think, or what do you recommend, and so on. So not everybody asks back a question.
Okay, well,
sometimes we need to ask ourselves questions.
I would say this is one of my top skills. Strange question asking. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you will choose a city to host the Placemaking Week, the next one, where would you like to have it?
So this is really a question of where would I like to go. And it has to be in Europe. Does it have to be in Europe? Yeah, I mean, it pretty much does have to be in Europe.
Duh, Sofia.
Okay, so where are these questions not being asked then? Because that's where you should go. And what might be like a challenging...
You choose a city.
Place. Okay, well, a city that I love is Naples.
Napoli, Italy, yeah.
And I think that would be awesome because there's so much complexity to how space works there and placemaking. Like Naples is a city that is known as being like fascinating but disgusting.
True.
Like historically, and we still have these perceptions. And so it really raises questions like what makes a place? And I think it's a really interesting example.
Are you sure you're not there for the pizza?
I lived there for 3 years. If I eat any more pizza, I had to buy a bigger size trousers when I lived there.
But that's true. Like we have this image. So like you mean like go there, explore, and
it's
question why.
Much hidden language of place there.
Yeah.
I think it'd be an interesting one.
Cool. So Napoli is the next destination if you will be the one choosing.
Yeah.
Interesting, Sofia. So we are in the end of this episode. I'm really happy that you gave your time to talk. So 3 questions. The first one is that you give a message to Pontevedra. What should they think about when they continue working on developing the city?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I love living here, and I think it has I love the exploration that you have in the city. I personally think that there is a mobility problem, even though, of course, the pedestrianisation of the city is great. The periphery is less great. And I would like to work with or to observe or hear more about how the centre is going to be connected to the areas around it, mobility-wise.
Yeah. So this is a message to Pontevedra. And now 3 takeaway messages to our listeners.
Whoa.
Urban practitioners. So take your time, think about it.
I'm not an urban planner.
That's why you're here.
Okay.
Yeah, because like we want to listen to voices out of our community.
Well, think about the social implications of the technologies that you're using in the planning process and that you're using to shape space. Whether that's a road or a digital planning platform would be my first one. Think about how the project that is being realized relates to economic growth and its environmental impacts more broadly. And finally, think of post-growth.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for sweating through that with me.
Okay, and the last question is going to be asked by you. It's now your turn. Okay, during the episode you ask so many questions, but usually people don't ask, they answer here. So,
yeah.
What is your question to us, to me and to the listeners? Like,
oh God, more questions.
You're good in.
I asked them all. My question to you is, well, but it's all the same question. Like my big question is, can placemaking create a systemic change in the economy?
It's a really good question because like we as a placemaker, we will work with different kind of economy, like circular, alternative, like we try our best to find like economical model that like make it sustainable for the planet, for the business owners, for the people. But this question is also like good for us to rethink what we are working with. So I'm really happy that you asked this question to us. Sofia, thank you so much. I'm really, first of all, I want to say thank you for thinking about this, and thank you for reaching out, telling us, okay, can placemaking, and the third, giving your time to record the podcast. So thank you so much again.
Thank you so much. I loved it. It was great.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica Podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. You learned something new and also got inspired by the guest. Don't forget to share the episode on your social media and recommend it to people you think they are really interested in this topic. Thank you so much again for giving your valuable time to Urbanistica Podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.